button and it should work. And I'm going to turn it right over to Anita.
All right, well, I'm so glad you're joining me today. And we're just going to talk about what is a pizza garden. So basically it's taking some vegetables and some herbs, things that you might put on a pizza, and putting it all in a garden. So today I'm going to make my garden in a pot, but you could just as easily do this in a corner of your garden at home, or if you have a raised bed garden, you could do it there. Another option is if you don't have a big pot, you can group some smaller pots of kind of the same types of plants and put them together and call that your pizza garden. Well, actually I was thinking when I was doing this pizza garden thing, I thought, you know, we could easily call this a pasta garden as well, because many of these same ingredients and plants could be used to make delicious pasta or pasta sauce. So whatever pleases you. So first of all, let's talk about a pot that we'll place them in. You can have a pot, can be made of a lot of different things, and actually have some examples of things. We've got plastic pots. We've got, it's a clay pot, but it has a shiny ceramic glaze on the outside. A couple years I had to have this metal container, and I decided I wanted to plant some things in it, and so I went ahead and did that. But the main thing that make sure that your plant or that your container has is holes in the bottom. So the plastic pot has holes. My glazed pot has holes. This one did not have holes, and so I just took a pitchfork and jammed them through the bottom and created some holes in it. But either way, those containers all can hold moisture. So once you water your plants, they'll stay pretty moist. The pot I've chosen today is actually terracotta. It's a clay pot that the moisture will actually absorb into the pot and it will evaporate. So this pot probably will have to be watered a lot more often than a plastic pot or a glazed pot. Again, you need to make sure that your pot has a hole in the bottom. And the main thing is so that your pot does not get waterlogged. It needs to have a place for the extra water to come out, especially if you get rain that you can't control how much you're watering it. It's a nice way to keep your pot from over watering. And lastly, for your pot, some of the plants that we're going to plant today like deep roots. So for this project, you're going to need a deep pot, at least 12 inches deep. And mine's about 14 inches across the top. This is probably the smallest container. If you have anything larger, that would work great. If you don't, then like I said before, you could easily group these in a group of smaller pots. So the next thing is the soil. So I've already filled my pot with soil. You're gonna go to your garden center or your hardware store and buy some potting soil. And potting soil is unique because it does not hold as much water as, say, the soil in your garden, or sometimes you can buy at the store topsoil. Those are really way too heavy for a pot. So if you buy just potting soil, and this is an example of one that I have bought, typically a potting soil does not have any nutrients in it, so you're going to want to have to supplement it with some fertilizer. Some of them do come with fertilizer, but I like to add a little bit of my own. So fertilizer can come in a couple different forms. You can dissolve some in water and water your plants with the fertilizer. You have to do that every 1 or 2 weeks. But the way that's easiest that I like to do is just to use what's called a slow release fertilizer. And that will slowly feed your plant over time. Slow release fertilizer is going to come in granules. You can see that. Looks like little granules. And when you use a fertilizer, the main thing you got to do is make sure that you read and follow the directions on your particular type that you bought. So you want to make sure you get the right amount, not too much, not too little. So for this project, mine recommends about 2 scoops in my pot. So I'm going to sprinkle them on the top. And then here's where the fun part comes in. You just get to mix it in. Probably the top 4 inches or so. It doesn't have to go real deep. The water will take it down further if the roots, when the roots need it. So next is the fun part. We get to choose our plants. So first of all, you can see I already have plants here. These plants I bought from my local garden center. At this time of the year, it's too late to start seeds. So you're just gonna wanna go buy some things from the garden center. And I've been at garden centers lately, and they still do have vegetables around. So you can find some things out there now. But the main attraction in my plot is going to be a tomato. I have two different types of tomato plants here. If you've ever grown tomatoes before, you might know that they can get really big and really out of control, and you have to put a cage around them to control them, but our pot is way too small for that. So I have bought dwarf tomatoes, or what's called determinate tomatoes. And if you go to your garden center and ask for a determinate or dwarf tomato, they can help you find them, or it says it right on the tag. This one is a Roma tomato, and then this one is a little cherry tomato, which I think I'm gonna plant in a different pot. For this purpose, I'm gonna plant this one. The tag is a very helpful thing. It can tell you how much sun your plant needs, what types, how wet your soil should be. It also tells you how to plant your plant. Now, this particular tomato plant, the instruction says to bury 2/3 of the plant. Now, that sounds a little bit shocking, but that's what we're gonna do. And the reason is, you'll see on the stem of your tomato plant that there are these little hairs, and these little hairs actually can become roots. So if we bury our plant up to here, then all the additional roots that come off of this plant will be available to get more nutrition and nourishment to our plant. So I'm gonna dig a big hole here. And I'm going to trim off some leaves. This one, this one, this one. Just squeeze the pot a little bit. I'm gonna go probably about halfway down my pot with this plant. And because it's the star of the show, I'm gonna put it right in the back. It's gonna be big and tall. There we go. Next, I'm gonna add a pepper plant. Now you can add any kind of pepper you want. It can be your standard green, red bell pepper. If you like something a little spicy, you can go with a jalapeno. I picked what's called lunchbox red. I've never even had this before, but it looks like a small red tomato, and I thought, yeah, we'll try it. So I'm gonna tuck him right next to the tomato plant. Right over here. Most other plants, you're going to make sure that you plant at the same depth as the pot, as the dirt in the pot. So we don't have to bury this one like we did the tomato plant. Okay. Next, we're going to look at herbs. There's a lot of different herbs we can include in here, and I'm just going to show you a few. So this is a basil plant. This actually has two different kinds of basil on it, purple and green. We have oregano, which I chose this bright yellow one because I thought it would look pretty in my pot. Parsley, there's parsley. You could pick thyme. And I really wanted to include an onion, but I couldn't find any at my garden center. Instead, I bought chives. That'll add a little bit of fresh onion flavor to my pizza. Lastly, I have a cilantro plant. So cilantro isn't something you would put on your pizza, but maybe you might want to change this whole thing to a salsa garden. You could use cilantro and peppers and tomatoes and onions and make salsa. So my favorite kind of pizza is margarita pizza, which just has tomatoes, cheese, and basil. So I'm going to add some basil to my pot. Now this pot you can see is actually called a peat pot. It's a soft pot, not plastic. And you can plant this right in the dirt. You don't even have to take it out of the pot. But I like to trim off the top little edge here because then I can make sure I get it level with the dirt. So pull that off. And put them right next to my tomato. Okay, so as I said before, I chose chives. And I've already trimmed the top off of this plant. Since this one's gonna get kind of tall and spiky, I'm gonna place it right in the middle. And lastly, like I said, I'm gonna put the oregano in just because I like the color. I don't necessarily put fresh oregano on my pizza, but it sure will make a pretty plant in my pot. I'm gonna put him right in the front so he can spill over the side of the pot. Now, once you get all your plants in, we're going to look around and see if there's any gaps, like maybe I didn't have quite enough soil in here. So take my bag of potting soil, just kind of fill in some gaps here. That looks pretty good. And once you have your plants all in where you want them to go, you want to make sure you put your pot in a sunny spot. You're going to need, for these plants to be productive, they're going to need probably 6 to 8 hours of sun a day. Now, I live in a very shady area, so I will buy a little, I don't know if you've ever seen the little trolleys, plant trolleys with wheels on them, and I'll put my pot on a little trolley, and then we will chase the sun, hopefully get 6 hours of sun a day. Anyways, that's how I get my sun. When you got your pot where you want it, then you're gonna wanna water it. You're gonna take your hose with a soft sprinkle head or a watering can with a sprinkling head. And you're gonna make sure you water the dirt. You don't wanna necessarily water the plants because the dirt is, or the roots are what are gonna want the water. So you're gonna water your dirt and let it sink down in, and then water some more, let it sink down in, until you see the water coming out of the bottom of the pot. Then you will know that your pot is fully watered and ready to go. That's all I have. It's as simple as that. Does anyone have any questions?
There you go. Feel free to unmute yourself and ask a question. I kind of have a weird question. Is it possible to put too many plants in one pot?
Well, it is, because you want to make sure you have sufficient, and I would say in this case, yes. You want to make sure you have sufficient airflow so that you don't end up getting fungus or disease on your plants. Now, as these begin to grow taller, it may create some more room for the plants on the bottom, but probably in this size of pot, I think 5 plants was plenty.
I have a question.
Yes.
How often are you going to water this group of plants?
Great question. I would say if it's in full sun, it needs to be watered once a day. Now my pot, because it's terracotta, I may even have to water it twice a day because it's going to dry out. But the way that you can test is if you take your fingers and you dig them a couple inches down in the soil, if it's not wet or moist, then you probably need to water it.
Okay. That's usually where I kill it. I'm either over or under. That's what I thought I would ask. I'm like, okay, there's a lot of plants in there, so I better find out.
And sometimes just saying every day, then you don't have to worry about sometimes, only if it needs it. Don't water it every day, and you're probably better safe than sorry.
I got a question.
Okay. Yes.
Anita, how often are you going to fertilize that pot? And what are you going to use?
Yeah, the fertilizer I put in here is a slow release fertilizer. It will last probably a couple months. So really, I won't need to fertilize it until then. Maybe after a couple of months, I could begin to fertilize with the water-soluble fertilizer in my watering can. And then I would probably do that every once or twice, or once every week or two.
Thank you.
So the pot you put together is clearly for outdoor use. Do we have any options for growing things indoors over the winter, or in Minnesota is that not enough sunlight?
You can grow herbs in a bright window. It's difficult to get enough light to get them. I mean, what will happen is they probably will get a little bit long and leggy because they're reaching for more sun. But you can grow herbs in Minnesota. Probably not vegetables, but some herbs in a bright sunny window.
Great. Any more questions? Oh, I know. You had 2 different colors of basil. Do they taste different or do they taste the same?
They taste the same. One might be a little bit stronger. Okay. I think the green is a little bit stronger than the purple, but.
Cool. Alrighty then. Well, if there are no other questions, oh, hey, Tommy. I'm going to say thanks again for everybody to joining us, and thanks to Anita, who is, master gardener for Scott County and Carver County in Minnesota. I appreciate her time and everyone showing up today. Hopefully you'll be able to have noticed that this is a great way to start a project if you are thinking about 4-H, or if you have friends or neighbors or family members that are thinking about 4-H. This is a good way to try your hand at growing and think about how you might use this pizza and or pasta and or salsa garden as part of an exhibit for your county showcase. So thanks again to Anita for sharing her knowledge with us today, and goodbye to everybody for coming in. Appreciate your time. Thanks very much.
Thank you.